Okay, so the recording has started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Now, can everybody see my screen? Great. Okay. So this afternoon, I'm going to take you through the agenda is to take you through the benefits of joining a regulated profession, the background of social care worker regulation in Ireland, the routes to registration and details for how to register, the documents required and information for employers, how to keep updated, the demonstration on the applicant portal, notes on CPD, continuous professional development, and as I said, lots of time for questions and answers. As this webinar is being recorded, please feel free to turn off your cameras as well. So about CORU. So CORU are Ireland's multi-health and social care regulator. Our purpose is to protect the public, promoting a high standards of professional conduct, education and training and competence through statutory registration of health and social care professionals. We play an important part in Ireland's health and social care system. So you all want what's best for your service users, and with CORU, they have somewhere to turn if something does go wrong. Next, I'm going to talk through the benefits of joining a regulated profession. So those attending this afternoon may or may not be aware, but often professions would lobby for regulation by CORU, and for the social care worker profession, that wait for regulation has been a long one. So for professionals, you can legally use the title social care worker in practical terms. Hi, Janet. Sorry, I will slow down. No problem. I do talk fast. So you can legally use the title social care worker. So in practical terms, that means it might make it easier to move roles. You will be supported in your role through a code of professional conduct, which is developed in consultation with the professions. So that means that there's an agreed standard that's the same for everybody. So you're all at this webinar today because you're dedicated professionals. And sometimes things might go wrong, and this means that there's a process to deal with that via regulation, and that process is the same for everybody. For the public, members of the public will now have greater confidence in the profession. Social care workers' standing has been and qualifications, knowing that they have been independently verified. Employers can be assured that CORU social care workers have completed formal registration. They've satisfied the board that they're fit and proper to engage in the practice of the profession, which is supported by Garda vetting, and Brona is going to demonstrate what that looks like on the applicant portal in a little while. And during the first 2 years of the register opening, an employer can support an employee if they're seeking to have an employer opinion of competency provided in order to progress their application. And again, we're going to come to that in more detail later. What does a regulator bring to a profession? It improves the quality of care, sets the standards of competency, encourages continuous professional development and education, identifies the competence of an individual practitioner, and reassures the public about the competence of health and social care professionals. There were over 30,300 health and social care professionals whose work is regulated by CORU. So for the social care worker profession, it was the 10th register to open, and CORU will open its 11th register this year in October with the opening of the psychologist register. On the 30th of November 2023, that's when the register opened for social care workers in Ireland, and there's now over 3,000 applications on the system and over 1,500 registered social care practitioners already. From the 30th of November 2023, a 2-year grandparenting period opened, and during this time, existing practitioners, so those in the practice of the profession, should apply to register, because the grandparenting period recognises reciprocal arrangements such as legacy qualifications and other arrangements as well, which we'll come to in more detail. On the 30th of November 2025, the title social care worker will be legally protected. Only those who have applied will be permitted to use the protected title from this date. So for some of those attending today, the grandparenting route will be the only route available to them to apply to register. So if there's one key takeaway from the presentation today, is to ensure that you get your application in on time. I suppose anything can happen at the last minute as well. We just had Storm AO in, somebody might be unwell. Somebody might be relying upon a third party to provide documents, such as a education provider. So just to please not leave it to the last minute, because once we get to the 30th of November, the law is clear. Only those who have registered will be permitted to use a protected title thereafter. And we don't want anybody to be in the position where they're locked out from using that professional title or working in the practice of the profession if impacted by doing so. So the routes to registration. Firstly, to come to the definition of a social care worker. Social care workers are professional practitioners engaged in the practice of social care work. Social care work is a relationship-based approach to the purposeful planning and provision of care. Protection, psychological support and advocacy in partnership with vulnerable individuals and groups who experience marginalisation, disadvantage or special needs. Principles of social justice and human rights are central to the practice of social care workers. So there's 3 pathways on my screen highlighted, which are the 3 pathways available to register for the profession. The first is the existing social care worker route, and we'll come to that in more detail. The new social care worker route or approved qualification route, or for those who have an international qualification for which they're seeking to be recognised. So coming back to existing practitioners, they are required to evidence 2 years practice, so minimum of 2 years, and that 2 years practice has to have been completed in the previous 5 years. The 2 years don't need to be consecutive, it just needs to be a total of 2 years practice, and that permits somebody to apply under the grandparenting provisions. In addition to evidencing the 2 years practice, then that person might submit evidence that they hold an approved qualification, or they might submit evidence that they have a Schedule 3 qualification, which I'll show you in a moment, or that they have a qualification which is sufficiently relevant to that. Or they might submit an employer opinion of competency form as their route to registration. Or they might submit an application to the register seeking to complete the test in order to complete their registration. So it's 2 years practice plus one of these. Separately, the new social care worker pathway requires evidence of an approved qualification, and it's also available to those who might be returning to the practice at the end of the transition period. Applicants who have a qualification obtained abroad can seek to have that qualification recognised as their route to registration also. Actually, back to these slides, these 3 pathways. The one highlighted in yellow, the grandparenting one, is the one that is time sensitive. It will close at the end of November. And the remaining pathways to register for the profession then into the future will be the new social care route or the international qualification route. So coming back to grandparenting, that requires evidence of practice of 2 years out of the previous 5, and a proof of professional employment form would be the document your employer would complete confirming your details in relation to that practice. And in addition to that, you either provide an appropriate qualification, an employer opinion, or you endeavour to successfully complete the assessment or the test. Just to highlight here that there's no more prestigious route to registration. These are all merely pathways to registration under the grandparenting provisions. So somebody might have a qualification and be able to obtain an employer opinion, and they may decide it's easier to submit the employer opinion. It's not that one applicant route is, more prestigious than the other. Again, back to the grandparenting provisions, the practice is required in 2 years out of the previous 5. And that practice can be in Ireland, the UK or the EU. And an applicant can submit an application under the grandparenting provisions until the end of that period, which is November this year. So to give an example, an applicant might have begun practice as a social care worker in October 2023, and they could still apply under the grandparenting provisions in October 2025, as long as they have the 2 years practice built up in that time. Only professional experience counts, so student placements do not count towards professional practice. And an applicant should demonstrate the practice of the profession, not necessarily that they're using the title social care worker. Just to note that employment and remuneration policies post-registration are outside the scope of CORU. So these are the Schedule 3 qualifications. After the end of grandparenting, only approved qualifications will be considered. During grandparenting, however, there are additional provisions for registration, such as Schedule 3. And this is the list of Schedule 3 qualifications for social care registration. There's 5 qualifications listed, and you can see these on the website. As I said, after the end of grandparenting, only approved qualifications will be permitted for registration for the profession. An approved qualification is where the college or higher education provider has submitted the qualification for formal programme approval, and they will be the enduring standard required post the end of the transition or grandparenting period. The board recognises or is aware that some social care workers may not have a Schedule 3 qualification, and the board can assess an application by a qualification by an applicant, whereby they're seeking for their qualification to be determined as sufficiently relevant, and these can be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Such qualifications are generally expected to have core learning outcomes in social studies, psychology and social care practice placement, And keep in mind, an applicant can combine qualifications for this assessment if they hold more than one in order to demonstrate those core learning outcomes. There's a long list on the website of over 70 qualifications that have already been determined as being sufficiently relevant, and these will be a pathway to registration under the grandparenting provisions only. Some of the examples are on this slide as well. Separate to qualification routes, an applicant might, under the grandparenting provision, provide an employer opinion that confirms that they have been engaged in the profession and that they meet the standards. Or separate to a qualification or an employer opinion, under grandparenting, an applicant might complete the test, which is known as the Assessment of Professional Competence, and it's delivered through the Technological University of the Shannon. It's not a full level 7 programme. The purpose of the test is to bring somebody onto a register who's in the practice of the profession. It's not there as a barrier to keep somebody out of the profession. There's been an excellent success rate to date for all of those who've taken the test so far as well. So to summarise, current social care workers, they're existing practitioners. They must complete the existing practitioner application form on the website. Brona is going to demonstrate that in a little while. They're confirming to the board that they've been practising in the profession, that they either hold relevant qualifications or they've completed a competency test or they have an employer opinion. They're deemed fit and proper to practice the profession and they've completed Garda vetting. For new graduates who have an approved qualification, they submit the approved qualification for this pathway. It might be available for those who've been practicing abroad and those who are returning to the profession post the end of the transition period. If you fall into one of these categories, in order to register, you must hold an approved qualification, and they're listed on the CORU website. You complete an online application form, demonstrate that you're fit and proper to practice the profession. Again, you're going to see this with Brona's demonstration in a little while. And that you satisfy the board that you have sufficient knowledge of the language necessary to practice the profession in Ireland. For some, this may include taking a language test. Just to note that those with qualifications from abroad must first have their qualification recognised in order to apply for registration. For international applicants with a qualification achieved outside of Ireland, and if they want to practice as a social care worker here, they can apply to have that qualification recognised by the board as their route to registration. This ensures everyone providing health and social care services in Ireland meets the standards of proficiency for safe practice here. And to be eligible for recognition of an international qualification, you must first have completed professional training, which gives you eligibility to practice the profession in the country where you were awarded that qualification. The registration board will assess that qualification as well as any other qualifications and practice for compliance with the standards required for practicing in Ireland. So how do I register? Firstly, to note that there are detailed guidance notes available on the website coru.ie, and these provide a step-by-step guide to registration and links, useful links to support your application. Those seeking to apply under grandparenting under the existing current practitioner route would need to review the Section 91 guidance notes shown in yellow, and those applying with an approved qualification would need to apply with the Section 38 guidance notes. Apologies, I just realised there's a duplication there. It should say S38. So additional requirements in terms of documents to be required, to be provided, you will be required to provide proof of ID, so photo ID, and if you've changed name, evidence of name change. If you're submitting a qualification for review, you'll be required to provide a copy of the qualification certificate or parchment that you received when you graduated, and this does have to be certified. In some cases, you'd be required to provide a certified copy of the transcript of your results as well. So for example, if your qualification parchment is in Latin, a copy of your certified transcript of results is also required in that instance. Or if you're submitting a new qualification to the board for assessment, they will require that transcript from the outset. Where a board is assessing a new qualification for the first time, they may also request further information in order to be able to assess the qualification. If you're applying under grandparenting with an employer opinion, you will need to upload the completed employer opinion form, and no qualification documents are required in that instance. Other documents that would be required: there's a signed e-vetting form, so Garda vetting is required per registration. Granted, a lot of applicants will be completing Garda vetting annually through their work or very regularly through their work, but specific Garda vetting is required for a CORU registration. An applicant also needs to complete a statutory declaration form, which must be signed under oath, and that confirms the profession to which they're seeking to register. So on the left-hand side, I have two different examples there of the statutory declaration. So because you'd be registering for the professional use of the title social care worker, that's what needs to be on the form shown in the bottom. And up on the top left, you can see this one had just social care on it, which cannot be accepted and had to go back. An applicant who has lived outside of Ireland for more than 1 year and 1 day, past the age that they were 18, also needs to provide a certified copy of police clearance. And applicants applying under grandparenting would require to evidence their practice, which requires provision of the proof of professional employment form and a job specification for their role. So, what is certification? Certified copies are copies of original documents that have been formally checked and stamped by an approved certifier. So just to give you an example, sometimes applicants would submit a photo of their qualification parchment in the frame in their office or in their home, and that is not a certified copy. A certified copy is where that parchment has been taken out of its frame, photocopied, and an approved certifier has stamped the photocopy confirming that that document was the original document and they've checked and certified it. So on this screen you can see the list of the approved certifiers. Just to note, the An Garda Síochána can certify all your documents, except they cannot certify the statutory declarations, and there is a statutory declaration submitted with all applications. Again, in relation to certification, sometimes a certifier may not have a stamp. You can see that the form does state, if you do not possess an official seal or stamp, please, you must provide full name and address in block capitals. Sometimes that's missing, and we might need to send an application back to get it recertified again. So all of these things can be fixed. It's just to highlight them from the outset if they might make your application process smoother. You can register on the portal on CORU's website, and Brona is going to take you through the application portal in a moment. The application fee is €100. And the renewal fee is also €100. It's paid each November. Just to note, those applying under the grandparenting provisions do not need to pay a renewal during grandparenting. So if you were to apply today in March, you would pay €100 today. And the next payment you would make would be in November 2026 if you're seeking to renew your registration, at which time you would pay €100 then. You can visit coru.ie to begin your application. So what's an employer's role? An employer might be required by an applicant to verify their engagement in the practice of the profession, which is 2 years out of the previous 5 years. And this is evidenced through the proof of professional employment form. And it's important that the form accurately reflects the title held of the employee and their duties and responsibilities are listed. We also now request that a job specification for the role be attached. In relation to the proof of professional employment and the title, this is something we see commonly where an employee might approach a manager and advise them that this should say social care worker, but in fact it should just reflect the title held by that employee. So let's use the example of somebody using the title person in charge, engaged in the practice of social care work. This form should just say person in charge because that is their role. And the application submitted by the applicant should say person in charge as well. So it should just accurately reflect the title held by that person. An employer might be requested by the employee to complete an employer opinion of competency form. Again, this is all under the grandparenting provisions. Just to note that an employer is not obliged to complete this form, and where an applicant under grandparenting is unable to provide a qualification or an employer opinion, they can still progress registration through completion of the test. Coming back to the employer opinion form, it is separated out into 4 sections. So Form 1 is the minimum duration of employment. So there's a requirement that the applicant was supervised by the employer for 6 months for that opinion to be deemed valid. So just using the example of Brona, my colleague today, if I was to give an opinion about her competence, I would have to ensure that I had supervised Brona for at least 6 months or more within the last 2 years for the opinion to be valid. Form 2 is the knowledge, skills and experience form. So again, if I was giving an opinion about Brona's competence, in this Form 2, it's my details that need to be completed there. So how I am able to, or have the knowledge, skills and experience form to be in a position to provide an opinion as to Brona's competence needs to be completed there. That's just one we would often see where the applicant's information is in here, which should be the person giving the opinion's details, knowledge, skills and experience should be completed in this section. Form 3 is the Standards of Proficiency form, which must be completed. And then Form 4 is the Statutory Declaration, which must be completed and certified under oath by an approved certifier in the presence of the employee and the employer. There's full council guidelines available in relation to the assessment, and I'd recommend that anybody completing an opinion read those first. Noting that an employer should not offer an opinion if there's a conflict of interest, and they may rely upon managers or team leaders to support forming a view. There's a dedicated section available on CORU.ie for social care workers to read resource materials and get updates on latest news and events. We also have a dedicated team available by email at socialcareworkers@coru.ie or by phone from Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And at this stage, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Brona can begin the demonstration of the portal. So just 1 moment now.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So, thanks, Christina. So as mentioned, I'm just going to walk us briefly through the application process. So just firstly, there are 2 ways in order to start an application. So firstly, you're going to go to the CORU.ie website. You're going to click on social care workers, and then you're going to come to a landing page with your 3 options. Secondly, you're again going to go to the CORU website. You're going to click social care workers, and then you're going to go how to register as a social care worker, and then click apply here. So that again is going to take you to a different landing page, but again, it's going to have the same 3 options. And when you're starting your application, you're going to be going to the applicant portal. The registrant portal is for anybody that's already been approved by the board and already on the register. And you'll be able to log in using your same details. So the same email address, the same password, and the same security information, then you would have been able to log into the applicant portal. And then just to note, the public register, that's your live register, okay? So that's any registrant that's already been approved by the board are on there for anybody to be able to look at. So just for today's example, we're going to look at the application portal. I'm going to just click OK. And then when you're setting up your new application, you're just going to click register for an account. And you're going to be putting in your email address in here. And just to note, it is better to use your personal email addresses, and that's purely for the fact that the registration itself is going to be your own personally. And if you put in your email address, that's your work email address, you might be reluctant or resistant then to just go on in your personal time and finish your application, or if there's anything that we need. So it's better to use your personal email address here. So when you put in your email address and you click next, you'll get a temporary password emailed to you. And make sure that you're doing this within a 15-minute window, because the passwords do tend to time out after 15 minutes. But when you get your temporary password and you enter it in, you'll then be taken to another page where you're going to fill in your name, your date of birth, and then your new password that you pick yourself. And then thereafter, it's going to prompt you to do extra security, and that will either be adding 3 security questions and answers, or alternatively, you'll be able to do another email security check, and you'll be obviously needing to do this every time you're required to log in. So we're just going to go to the testing environment, okay, just to show you what it's going to happen whenever you finally get logged in and have your new password set up. Now, you won't have any applications here, okay? And these are just for me to show you today. So you're going to be clicking on Start New Application. And this is technically step 1. So you've got all of the different professions here. And obviously we're talking about social care workers today. So you're just going to click on social care workers, and we're going to look at the different types that's available. Now, Christina's obviously after going through all of these with you, but just to note them again, you've got your international qualification application. And again, that's for qualifications outside of the Republic of Ireland. Then you've got your Irish graduate registration application. And again, like Christine said, it's for the new graduates and the ones that have obtained their qualification in the Republic of Ireland. Now, on our website, I think that there's approximately 42 qualifications that are currently on the bylaw, and they're down as approved qualifications. You are able to go onto our website to have a look at them and to make sure, obviously, that your qualification is definitely deemed approved if you do decide to go down this route. Now, most people probably on the webinar today are going to be taking the existing practitioner route. So again, like Christina mentioned, during the grandparenting period, we can do this route. And that's if we have 2 years out of the previous 5 working in social care work, and then one of the others. So either an approved qualification, sufficiently relevant qualification, Schedule 3 qualification, employer's opinion of competency, or an assessment of professional competence. So I know Christina has walked you through all of them already. And then also you've got a restoration application. Now this won't really apply to anyone at the moment because we've only so newly opened the registration. So this is for people that wish to restore their registration after voluntarily removing themselves from the register within the past 2 years, or if they've been removed for non-payment of the renewal fee within the last 6 months. So that's our options here. So we're just going to go back to the online applications, and I'm just going to go down through one of the applications I've prepared earlier. So I'm going to do an existing practitioner application, and this is one that has not been submitted. And how we know it's not being submitted is that the application status is still referring to new. So we know that we have not submitted this application yet. So we're going to click continue. And again, like I said, the first step of the application was the application type, in which we picked an existing practitioner. So that means that I myself, if it was myself, have 2 years out of the previous 5 working as a social care worker. The application instructions are as follows. Very important to read those. As Christina obviously alluded to as well, the registration guidance notes, very important. And obviously then you've got access to our email addresses, and our numbers as well are on the website. So once you confirm here, you click save and continue. And then step 3 is personal information, okay? So this is just general personal information, your title, your first and surname. Also, it's very important to remember your professional name, whatever you want your professional name to be. Generally, it's your first and surname, so people are able to find you on the register. It's very important that you get that right there, because that's what's going to be on your registration certificate, and also how people are going to find you on the public register. Also, just to note as well, if you're putting down previous names, you will be asked to put down the date of name change, but also to upload a document providing why the name was changed. So for instance, the most common ones we see would be birth certificates, divorce papers, and marriage certificates. So they're the most common ones that we get, but it's important to have that uploaded there if, again, you've put in your previous name. Then it's just things like your gender, your date of birth, addresses, different things like that, just your general personal information. And you're also able to opt into the CORU quarterly newsletter, but again, you don't have to, that's just a choice. And also then at the very end of step 3, it's your secret passphrase. And that's kind of good if you're ringing up CORU and you just can give them your quick secret passphrase, and that could be used as one of your checks before talking about your application. Now, just to note, as you go down through the steps, you have to fully complete a step before you save and continue. If there's anything that you haven't filled in, it will alert you to it and won't let you pass to the next step. And if you decide, I don't want to sit and do my full application, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to, but you do have to fully finish a step. Because if I only filled out half of my personal information and left my application to tomorrow, logged back on, all of my personal information would be gone because I never fully finished the step. So that's just something to be cognizant of. So we're going to save and continue and move on to the next step. Okay, so it's eligibility, okay? So again, I know we've referred to this again and again, but obviously it is important to note. You obviously, when you're an existing practitioner, you have to have your practice 2 out of 5 years, but also then you can choose one of the following, either if you're applying with your approved qualification, your assessment of professional competence, your employer's opinion of competence, your Schedule 3 qualification, your sufficiently relevant qualification. Now, I've picked for this example an approved qualification. And then there's a drop down and you'll get all of the different approved qualifications. And that's really important. And it's really important to look at your parchment and ensure you're selecting the correct one, because everything has to match. Your documents that you're uploading and what you're selecting on your application, everything has to match. And then additional details will be the date at which you obtained your degree, and then also your certified copy of your qualification cert. So as Christina said, taking your qualification down off the wall, as we all have them framed typically, getting a photocopied and taking it to a certifier, and that's what you can upload to ourselves. So again, you're going to save and continue. And the next step will be on your current employment. Now, with regard to this, again, I know we say it again and again, but it is so important. We just need to see demonstration of 2 out of the previous 5 years of work experience. So you'll be uploading that here. So you'll click on upload and add records. Now, what I would say to you is if you had different roles within the same organization, we would strongly recommend adding them as separate records. And the reason for that is that the board like to see every single title split out, because typically you have different duties and responsibilities in every different title that you'll have. So that's just something that would be a good idea, to make sure that all of your roles are split out and added as new records, so individually. So after you finish that section, you go on to memberships. And just to note, memberships is only if you're part of, for instance, the Teaching Council, or for instance, you've already got a CORU registration, maybe as a social worker. This would be the area that you would advise us of this. So it's quite a quick area. And then your support and documentation is the next step. Okay, so that's where you're going to upload everything. So your certified statutory declaration, your certified copy of ID, your proof of address, your criminal clearance check. Now, you only need a criminal clearance check if you've lived in Ireland over the age of 18 and for more than a year and a day. Okay, so that's the only reason we'll need a criminal clearance check. So as you can see, it doesn't have an asterisk on it. The ones that the documentation that has the asterisks on it are the ones we need from everybody, and the ones without the asterisks are ones that we only need if it's applicable to the applicant. So again, the evidence of name change in English or Irish, and that's only if you've had a previous name. Again, your proof of professional employment form, and then your additional supplementary documents, and that's for anything that you think will help your application when it goes in front of the board. So anything that you think is applicable. So then you've got your e-vetting form, okay? So you can click this hyperlink and it will actually take you to the e-vetting form, and you make sure to fill in all of the e-vetting form and then upload it here. And then also make sure that you're ticking this, that you've provided to validate your identity as required. That's very important. And just to note as well, all of the documents are available on the website, but you'll also see them through hyperlinks as you go through your application. So just to note that. So once that's done, we click save and continue, and then we're on the fit and proper survey. So every single question here has to be answered either by a yes or a no. If there is some that maybe require a little bit more information, for instance, if you're declaring you've got a health concern, you're going to be prompted to add in extra information just for CORU to have context, so that we're able to present it to the board and have the fully comprehensive story. For instance, also, if you've got a conviction, you'll also be prompted to add extra information here. But otherwise, once you have all of that answered, you'll click save and continue. And the next step is only applicable, again, like I said, for people that lived outside of Ireland over the age of 18 for more than a year and a day. So otherwise, if you have not, you will just click save and continue. If you have, you'll click yes, and you'll fill in the details and upload a criminal clearance certificate that is certified for that country that you lived outside of Ireland in. And then we're just going to click save and continue. And at this point, you're nearly done with your application. You're on the attestation, and that's making sure that you confirm and understand everything within your application. So again, it's very important that you read everything here, that you're clicking everything as you go before you save and continue, because the next step is where you make payment and you submit your full application, which means you're no longer able to go and edit your application. Okay, it's sent then to CORU for the verifications to start. Okay, so it's very important that before you go to the save and continue for the next step, that you're making sure that you're comfortable and happy with everything within your application. So as I said, this is the payment section, and that's the last section that you'll do before you're finished your application. Okay, so I'm just going to go back out and just quickly demonstrate something else before I hand back to Christina. So this is an application here, 1395. And again, this is the learning environment. These aren't real people. But this is an application that was already submitted. And we can actually see that a verifier has marked this as stage 2 missing information. We can also see when it was submitted. So we submitted this application on the 12th. And we can see here that there's a documents tab. So that means that there's documents that need to be uploaded. So we're going to click into our documents. Now, so we're able to see here documents waiting for submission. So we can see the document type is proof of address, and we can see the comments from the verifier. Hi, Emily, please upload a document of proof of address which is dated within the last 6 months. So the document that I might have uploaded might have been a little bit older than the last 6 months, and we do need the proof of address to be within the last 6 months. So it's given us an upload link here, so we're able to get a new proof of address and then upload it there. We can also see our submitted documents as well, and it'll show us the document type, submitted date, and the status. So we can see that Christina, who is obviously the verifier on my application, has said it's not approved or invalid on my proof of address, and hence has asked me for a new proof of address. And then we can also see that some documents have been marked as approved or received. And also on your online application, when you have submitted, you're able to go back and just get a overview of all of the application. So you're able to see on review every single step that you took. So you can review all of them, and you can also download to a PDF if you do want reference for that as well. But that's everything from myself. I'm going to hand you back to Christina, and she's just going to finish off the presentations before we take questions. And thanks very much for listening and attending today, everybody.
Thanks, Brona. I'm going to share my screen one moment. Yeah. Okay, so this is where we left off. Thank you, Brona, for taking us through the applicant portal. So just to imagine that you have now submitted an application and you're wondering what's next. So my team will review your application and they will contact you directly if there's anything else required. And Brona has demonstrated how that might appear on the applicant portal when you receive a message or a document is required to be uploaded. You will also receive an invite to complete Garda vetting within a couple of weeks. And from time to time, my team will need to request further information in order to get as clear an application before the board for a decision. Once there is a decision on your application, you will be contacted with full details. So just a note on those who've joined the register and are now required to complete continuous professional development. So CPD commences from when an applicant is registered, and there are 30 credits required per year which pertain to new or enhanced learning. 1 hour is equal to 1 credit. Applicants don't need to upload their records annually. However, if they're called to audit, they will be required to upload the records of their CPD. CPD audit will start at the end of the transition period and looks back on the previous 12 months. So it will start in November 2026, looking back to the previous November 2025. There is a CPD team available within CORU Executive, and their contact details are cpd@coru.ie if you have any questions. So I might open the floor up to questions now, and I have a couple of questions that have come in from my colleagues that you've been submitting on the chat. And I might just go back a couple of slides in support of answering those questions, if that's okay. So we've had a lot of questions about the routes to registration. So I'm just going to come back to this slide here. So anybody applying under grandparenting is required to provide evidence that they've been in practice for 2 years out of the previous 5. And an applicant might be using a different title. However, the important thing is that they're engaged in the practice of the profession. So somebody gave a couple of different examples there in the chat. For project worker, I saw line manager, team leader. We could see all kinds of variants of titles here, but the important thing is that the practice you're completing in your role is that relevant to a social care worker. So it's not for Brona or I or Anne-Marie to say what that title means that you are engaged in the practice of the profession, but this form will confirm to the board that that person is or is not. So the example I used earlier was the person in charge. So the proof of professional employment form will say person in charge, how long they're working in the organisation, and their duties and responsibilities. If, let's say, that person was working as a person in charge with TUSLA and they previously worked as a social care worker with TUSLA and previous to that they worked as a social care lead with TUSLA, they should have 3 separate forms in that case pertaining to each specific role, where those roles are required to evidence the 2 years practice. If imagining somebody has a long career in social care work, we don't need forms for each and every role that you've held. It's just relating to the 2 years practice to evidence that 2 years minimum, okay? Please don't confuse the proof of professional employment form with the employer opinion of competency. That's a separate route within grandparenting. So anybody applying under grandparenting has to provide evidence of the 2 years practice, which is this proof of professional employment form. In addition to that practice, then, you can provide either an appropriate qualification, an employer opinion, or take the test. It is the decision of an employer whether they're completing an employer opinion or not. Keep in mind that an applicant can still apply to the register on successful completion of the test, which is delivered through the Technological University of the Shannon. So a couple of other questions that have come through. How long does it take to process applications? So we're currently operating on a 31-day time frame for those applying under grandparenting. So that 31 days is from when the application is complete and has come through final checks. For those applying under the new graduate pathway, we're operating on about a 4-day time frame. Those applying with the approved qualification pathway do not require evidence of their practice, so there's less documentation. It tends to be a little bit faster. Certified documents, I think there's been quite a few questions on that, so I'm just going to come back to my certified documents page. So certified documents are where the original document has been taken, photocopied, and the photocopy has been certified. In our guidance notes, you'll find full links to the certifiers. Practicing solicitor, commissioner for oaths, peace commissioner, or notary public, and the certifiers will have different fees attached. The guards can certify all of your documents, however, they cannot certify the statutory declaration, and there is a statutory declaration provided, required with every application. Somebody had asked, if you get your qualifications sent directly from the college to CORU, do they need to be certified? No, in that case. If you have an approved qualification, CORU do have a relationship with higher education providers who can provide your results directly to CORU, in which case you do not need to provide any documentation relevant to your qualification. So how do you apply for Garda vetting? That's completed through the application portal, and you need to complete the e-vetting form. I think I have that here on my documents page, apologies. So there's an e-vetting form which you would complete, and once you've completed that form, you'll receive an invite by email. You'll complete that invite and take a note of any addresses where you've lived, and we'll be able to process your e-vetting Garda results then. CPD, somebody asked, we've answered that. Somebody asked in relation to the employer opinion, is there any liability for an employer if there's an issue on the basis of an opinion that they've completed? I think that's a great question, and just to really highlight that the employer opinion is provided at a point in time. So if the employer has satisfied that the person they're providing the opinion for meets the standards of proficiency for safe practice, they can sign off that employer opinion in good faith, and there's no legal repercussions into the future if there was a complaint against that person. So it really is a point in time assessment of the person's competency against the standards of proficiency for social care. Let's have a look through more questions. So questions about sick leave and maternity leave. So maternity leave and sick leave are statutory leave. So once you're still employed with the organisation, that still counts towards your 2 years out of the previous 5 in terms of your employment. Can I apply under the grandparenting route if I have 2 years experience but I work under the title care assistant? So again, we've already sort of highlighted that in terms of the title somebody uses. It's not for us to say the practice that you're engaged in is not the practice of a social care worker. You can determine that, and your employer might determine that in completion of your duties and responsibilities. The important thing is that it's not about the title you currently work under, but it's about the work that you're doing. So if the work that you're doing is that of a social care worker, in terms of the full breadth and responsibility of that role, you may be eligible to apply. What if I have a social care degree, worked in the role for a number of years, however, in the last 6 years I've not been working in this role within the organisation, but I'm still being paid at the social care worker grade with a title change. Okay. Working in this role within the organisation. Not entirely sure what you're asking there. What if I have a social care degree, worked in the role for a number of years, for the last 6 years I've not been working in this role within the organisation, but still paid. Okay, so you're still paid at a social care worker grade. Again, it's coming back to that same question about the title. If you're engaged in the practice of the profession for 2 years, out of the previous 5 years at the time that you apply, which you can do anytime until the end of this November, you're eligible to apply under grandparenting. That person who asked the question mentions a social care degree. So just to note, they may have an approved qualification. You can see that full list on the website, in which case they can apply under either pathway during the grandparenting period. I have worked as a social care worker for many years. I'm now in a project worker role. So that's the same question around the titles. We'll look through these questions. Somebody asked, I'm going the grandparenting route and I have a BA in applied social care. Do I also need an employer opinion? So no, you don't. These are either or options. So I'll just come back to that screen again. So if you're applying under grandparenting, you either need to provide a qualification or an employer opinion or a test. You complete the test. If you have a qualification, you can progress with that. Equally, if you have an employer opinion, you can progress with that, where you might still be qualified but prefer to complete with an employer opinion. So that's no problem. Once registered with CORU CPD, are individuals liable for the registration costs, or is it employers? So registration for use of the professional title is completed on an individual basis. So an individual pays for registration. In some cases, an employer may be willing to support towards the payment of the fees. However, that's an employer question. I'm not currently practicing as a social care worker, but may do so in the future. If I don't register now and decide to do so in 3 or 4 years, does that mean my degree will not be recognised and I can't legally practice as a social care worker? So this person said they're not currently practicing as a social care worker, but they might in future. Okay, so depending, they haven't said what qualification they hold. So if they hold a qualification that's not on the approved list, that means the grandparenting provision is the route for that person, as long as they have had practice in the last 2 out of the previous 5 years. They could apply between now and the end of November, and it would be important that they do that to ensure that they can use the title into the future. If they waited until after the end of grandparenting and their qualification is not on an approved list, not on the approved list, that means that they would only be able to register on completion of that qualification. They would not be able to use the title then once the title becomes legally protected. So somebody asked, how does CORU assess prior experience in social care work outside of Ireland? So again, it's the same process. An applicant outside of Ireland might might seek to apply to register under grandparenting where they've worked in Ireland, the UK or the EU. This is permitted under the legislation. And it's the same process. They would complete, their employer would complete a proof of professional employment form, which lists their duties and responsibilities. And they would need to complete a job specification for their role as well. The applicant themselves has an opportunity to list their duties and responsibilities and outline how they meet the duties required as a social care worker when they submit their application, but the process is the same. Do you need 2 years experience if you do the assessment? So if you're seeking to complete the test, that is only available under the grandparenting provision. So you do need to have a minimum 2 years practice if you are hoping to take the assessment or the test. Okay, can an employer be held liable? We've answered that. I have a social care degree, social care level 7 from Dublin Business School that I've been working with for the last 2 years. I also have a level 5 and 6 in community care. Can I still use the employer competency route? You can use the opinion and competency route if you have 2 years practice, no matter if you have 1 qualification, no qualification, or 10 qualifications. That's no problem. it's an applicant's choice how they wish to progress their application. And in some cases, applicants may decide to provide an employer opinion as their route to registration. For example, if their qualification was obtained a long time ago, it might be difficult to receive documents from third-party providers such as education providers, and it may be easier for that person to submit an application with an employer opinion. No one route is better than the other. They're all routes to registration under the grandparenting provision. So yes, you can still complete an employer opinion. In that case, you don't need to provide anything relative to your qualification.
I'm just going to jump in here and just see a question. Just in terms of your proof of address, I do see a question there just in relation to that. If it has your partner's name, once it has your name, your full first and surname, and once it's within the last 6 months, if it also contains your partner's name, that's absolutely fine. Just once it contains your first and last name with the date on the proof of address, and once it's within the last 6 months. I do see. I also see one just in relation to your police clearance. Yes, your police clearance from if you lived outside of Ireland over the age of 18 for more than a year and a day, and you're providing the criminal clearance check, it does need to be certified. Just in terms of somebody asked a question, if you've submitted your vetting to MVB and you have not been asked for any more information, can you assume the next step is confirmation of registration? If we have not either messaged you, requested documents from you, and you're just waiting on your vetting, you can just wait and we'll be in contact as soon as the vetting comes back and it goes to board for review if we require nothing else. If we do require anything else, we will be in contact with you. So you'll either get a message from us or a document request.
Great. Thanks, Brona. I see a couple of questions around employers refusing to complete the employer opinion of competency. So again, just to come back to the fact that the employer is not obliged to complete that form. And if an applicant is unable to provide an employer opinion or qualification, they can complete registration if they have 2 years practice through the completion of the assessment through TUS. And full details are available on the website. An applicant with an approved qualification from the approved qualification list during grandparenting can apply under either the Section 38 provisions or grandparenting. So somebody in practice, let's say for 2 years, has an approved qualification from the approved qualification list, they could apply under either pathway during the grandparenting period. The differences, I guess, for those two routes is that an applicant applying under grandparenting needs to provide evidence from their employer that they've been engaged in practice. A person applying under the new graduate pathway does not. New graduates are charged the renewal fee each November, and there's a provision for those applying under grandparenting where renewal is not charged until the end of grandparenting in November 2026. Okay, so just having a look at the time. So at this stage, we're going to wrap up the questions. As I said, we are going to publish the webinar on CORU.ie. I'd encourage that everybody go to the website and have a look through those guidance notes and the required documents. And if you're applying under the grandparenting route, there's full links and resources available online that hopefully will answer your questions. But where you're unable to get an answer to those questions, please don't hesitate to contact the team. I'm just going to bring up our contact details again. So social care workers at CORU.ie or by calling, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, just to urge anybody who has 2 years practice that is relying upon grandparenting provisions in particular, not to delay and get their application ready and get it through on the system, and that we'll be in touch in the next couple of weeks with updates or hopefully with a decision around registration. We will follow up with another webinar in May. And at this stage, I just want to thank everybody for their time and for attending the webinar this afternoon. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Thanks, everybody.
Just
sorry,
Anne-Marie. Christina, I beg your pardon. Just Anne-Marie Bennett here, Head of Registration with CORU. Just to say, I see there's a lot of questions in, and Christina did put up the email address, so feel free to send those in if we haven't got to yours. I think we did answer the majority of them, just looking at them in the chat, but please feel free to send them to the specified email address that was on the presentation. Thanks a million, everyone. Thanks for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.